This week on FX Guide TV.
We look at Wes Ball's new action thriller Maze Runner and speak to the visual effects house, Method Studios, Vancouver.
This and more coming up next.
Hello, I'm Angie and welcome to this episode of FX Guide TV. Not long ago, we did a story on former FX PhD Professor Gareth Edwards' film Godzilla. This week, we look at another FX PhD professor's film, this time the action-adventure Maze Runner, directed by Wes Ball, and with visual effects by Method Studios Vancouver. Here's Mike, who sat down with the VFX supervisor, Sue Rowe.
Sue, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. So this is a really interesting creature work for your team. Tell me, I think you actually, built a team specially for this?
We did. We are hoping that Method Vancouver's USP is going to be creature work. So with that in mind, we decided to build a pipeline right from the very beginning. And it's become a kind of a hybrid that I'm really proud of. In order to build the Griever character, we employed some really great guys from lots of other facilities around the world. Eric de Boer being one of them, who got the Oscar for Life of Pi.
Yeah, he did the great work.
Great work. And so, encouraged him to come join us, as well as James Jacobs from Weta. And James won a SciTech award a couple of years ago for his work on the Goblin King. And I met those two, managed to say, I've got a great project coming our way. You know, how do you fancy coming to Vancouver and joining our team? And they loved the project. They had a look at the script and some of the visuals that we had, and they came on board. And that was it. We started running.
Putting a major creature pipeline together addresses an enormous amount of the areas that the company has to look at, because so one end you've got to make sure you can do really good rendering and of course match lighting perfectly, but at the other end there's character animation naturally. There's also simulation work, which you briefly touched on. Did you find that any one of those was something that you were sort of really having to focus on in this project, or was it just a combination of all of them?
For the creature work?
Yeah.
Yes. The main thing for me was how the creature was going to move. James Dashner describes the character so eloquently in the book, and it has a kind of organic parts of the body and metal parts of the body. So the thing that I sort of clicked into was, I imagined how these sort of brutal metal arms attached to the sort of organic soft tissue of the Griever would be. And that's when I talked to James and Eric and said, look, how do we best achieve this? How can we do it in a smart way? Because this isn't a huge budget movie. And how can we make it look convincing? And so we looked at a sort of a deformer solution. James had done a lot of work like that at Weta, and he's brought a lot of that talent and that understanding here to us at Method. And so we kind of worked on a system where the animators would animate the character in a certain way, but James's big thing was he would build the character and the skeleton to be correct. It has to be ergonomically correct, based in sort of natural physics. So we built the skeleton, we built the muscles, and that's how the character was going to move. And so, basing it on reality in that way really worked for us.
It has this kind of softer tissue back to it, doesn't it? Which gives it that kind of organic feel. It also gives you an opportunity to do some interesting things like, I guess that's nostrils, is it? What is it?
The blowholes, we kind of call them down the back. It's kind of how it inflates its chest and breathes. And the way we imagined the character at the very beginning was almost very percussive. We could imagine how it would move and what the sounds would be. And that's how we kind of riffed on this idea of what would happen to it. So the blowholes down the back contract and expand. And that was all written in procedurally, so we could accentuate that. And similarly with the tail, so the organic soft part of the body attaches itself then to the sort of metal thorax and the tail. And we had these little scissors, wine knives, we called them as we were working on them, that kind of went up and down the tail in a very fluid way, but aggressively fluid.
I would have thought it was the deformers around the neck, because the way the head retracts and comes out, I can imagine it could be a huge collision problem it looks great.
Yeah, we did have a few problems. It was a pretty tight deadline that we worked to, so we were smart about how we did it. This wasn't, there wasn't the sort of thing that we could R&D for months and months. So we had to be smart and make decisions on the best way to do it. And
did you do like a test scene, or were you just giving approvals off turntables in the early days as you were trying to narrow down the look?
We did. We turntables to begin with, but one of the things that Fox did ask us to do, which was a big challenge, which was before filming finished, they wanted to see a moving Griever. And the shoot was only May to end of June, so we weren't shooting that long. So it was
Where
a
were
hell
you
of a
shooting?
In Baton Rouge.
Okay. So,
yes, lovely Baton Rouge.
So while the filming's on, you had to get that, and was that pretty much what ended up in the film, or were there major changes from that early
We did
test?
change it as it went on, but that was the first sort of confidence boost I think that we had, that we were able to turn something around very fast and encourage, Fox, who were taking a bit of a risk really with a company like us, to do that. And so, yeah, we got their confidence and took it from there. And one of the other reasons that I'd like to mention is my colleague Eric Breivik, who is a supervisor I've worked with many times in the past. He joined us for the shoot and became, a part of the team as the show progressed, because I had to go backwards and forwards to method to build this character as we were going. So Eric stayed in Baton Rouge and did the whole shoot, and I came backwards and forwards for the sort of integral stuff.
So in terms of running a project like that, I mean, how does this compare to the other stuff you've done? Because your career, you've done a lot of really interesting work.
Yes, it was quite a shock to go from doing John Carter, where I had 2 years, right, and a great budget, to turning something around from reading the first script and meeting Wes to finishing it in 1 year. So that's what I think is good for you, right? Keeps your mind going. But I think the great thing was that we never wanted to compromise visually. It was always, what can we do to plus it, and what can we do to make this look really great? Because you've met Wes, right? He's an incredibly talented and enthusiastic guy, and you can't help just loving him. He'll go, wouldn't it be great, Sue, if this happened? And you find yourself going, yeah, it would. God, how do I do that? And he used to make fun of me how I looked, because he'd go, what about this? And I'd be like, okay, I can do that. We can do it. And so that was fun. I liked him for that. And then you kind of find yourself going, okay, so the script says the floor cracks. Well, let's just plus it, right? What about if the slabs rise up and there's dust falling and they're only just missing it? And so he was great fun for that kind of thing. And there were times.
You mentioned Wes, the director there. He has a very strong visual effects background,
Yes.
so he really understands what's going on. In terms of working with him, it sounds like you really clicked, but were you sort of aware of that understanding of visual effects? Did it make it any easier?
It did make it a lot easier, because Wes would come over, every now and then, especially during the shoot, and say, is that really tricky over there? I'm sorry that the blue screen's not the right angle. There were a lot of challenges on the shoot. And we both learned a lot about each other, and the great thing was at the end we had quite a good shorthand about how we could achieve things. But he would be worried about some things that I wouldn't worry about, because he came from a background where he would know that to hand roto something would be really tricky. And so he would always be aware of that kind of thing. And sometimes I just laugh and go, don't worry about that over there. There's a whole 3D city behind us that's moving. And so we'd laugh about that. But yeah, he's incredibly talented and would do a lot of the previews himself. So if we'd be talking about something, how do we achieve this? He would quite often say, give me tonight, I'll work on it. And he literally would work overnight. The following day, he'd give me some previews and we'd look at it together. And
Yeah, because he's very fluent in Moto, isn't he?
yes, yeah, great tool. We actually use Maya and V-Ray at Method. And I think Wes had to go at using some Maya as well.
So let's discuss some of the shots. When our hero first appears in the maze, there's this pretty dramatic elevator sequence, or I'm about to be squashed sequence. And then that moves on to him appearing. There's this great 360 as we kind of first appreciate the area. Now, I'm pretty much going to guess you didn't have 360 degree of blue screen.
No, we didn't. And again, that's the sort of compromise that you make. I'm in a field in Louisiana, and we had to transport everything there and get everything back out. So literally we were carrying, our equipment on our backs. So to get 360 degrees of blue would be impossible. So we made a decision to be smart with our camera moves. Where the camera was low, I tried to put as much blue as I could behind him. And then we would tilt up so his head would be against sky, and then back around against trees at a certain point where I knew the trees would be there. And then at the end of the day, there are always times where you're just going to have to roto stuff. But we were pretty smart about where we put the blues, where we could. Eric Breivik on set was very savvy with that kind of stuff.
So most of the trees low down then are real, and then what you've blended it into the, how was the kind of, where was the transition line?
Rotoing thousands of leaves was going to be a nightmare, and pulling luminance keys against the various skies was never going to work for us. So what we did
People
was...
always think it works to use the blue screen sky. Yeah, no.
Yeah, people are like, it was a blue sky, will that work? No. And just putting blue or green on something doesn't make it disappear either.
Well, or if it does disappear, it doesn't put what was meant to be there back in its place. Yeah, no, I agree.
So, yes, we decided to look at speed tree. It's a very efficient tool for making trees.
Yeah, it seems popular, yeah.
So we would sort of give the tops of the trees a little shave, if you like, and then put our speed tree on the top there. So it would be CG against CG, which was a lot easier to...
I haven't used speed tree that much, but I would have thought that wouldn't have given you, say, the ivy on the buildings.
Right,
How'd you do that?
No, the ivy we...
on the walls. So.
Yes, on the walls. We did that procedurally. Obviously, it would be a huge amount of geometry, thousands of tiny leaves and the growing vines. So that was a challenge in itself. How were we going to do that without collapsing the render farm? So we used Houdini to start the build, and then we wrote a little sort of interface so that we could decide how many branches it would how many seeds, we call them, how they would branch out into different elements. And the thing for me was making sure it felt organic. So often things that grow procedurally, you don't have a lot of creative control over them. So my guys at Method wrote me a little tool so the artist could literally draw a line, and that's where the ivy would grow. And then, how many branches would come off that, And most of the time it worked well. Sometimes you'd have some really strange-looking trees in the morning when you come in and look at your render, but for the most part it worked great.
So you mentioned Houdini there, and you'd also mentioned earlier that cracking of the ground. I'm guessing you would have used Houdini. It's not really a destruction sequence, but it's the maze reforming and some of the dramatic stuff later in the film.
Yes, we have a great Houdini team at Method. So a fantastic artist called Lisa Nolan, who's a complete Houdini brain, and Niall Flynn also worked on it. And they came up with that. How do we do it and how do we break stuff up? And we studied a lot of concrete breaking, did an awful lot of reference. But the thing that really nailed it for us was adding a fine layer of sort of pyroclastic dust, if you like, and small bits of gravel. And adding that to the general chaos really made you feel like the kids were about to get, engulfed in that cloud, and that if they really got caught up by that wall, they'd be dead.
It's Maze Runner. So
there's a lot of running.
Yeah, there's a lot of running. But I was going to say, there's also one really great shot. We actually get to see the maze. We don't get to see a lot of kind of aerial view. I guess that would take us out of the story in the sense that we want to have that the maze rebuilding at night, so we don't know what's going on.
Yeah,
but there is that one big top shot. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, it's a beautiful shot. Wes did some previews for us on how we wanted it to look, because he wanted the audience to feel like the kids did, who are trapped in the maze, that most of the views are up and out. You feel claustrophobic, you're lost in that maze. So there is one shot towards the end of the movie where we rise up, and it's the first time the gliders who are escaping get to see over the top of the maze. And we actually built the maze for the first time, and it's a circular maze, and you can see all the different rings. And also you find out that you're in a desert environment. So the whole of the movie you're in this really lush green environment, and then there's a stark contrast between the green glade in the centre, and then it's desert beyond. So.
It's also nice that when you look at the topography of the maze, it seems quite zonal in the sense that you'd had a really good textural base for the different areas of the maze.
Yes, that's right. And as a story point as well, Wes wanted to make sure that when you're in the centre of the glade, it's green, and then as you go further and further out, it becomes more man-made, and there are a lot of symbols on the walls, and there becomes less and less ivy and greenery, so it becomes more sparse. So as a story point, you know where you are within the maze. That becomes relevant when you see the movie.
Yeah, hopefully not only we get to enjoy this movie, but if it's box office success, and we certainly hope it is, you guys get to make another one, and maybe I'll get to understand a bit more how the darn thing works.
Yeah.
At least who's pulling the levers, right?
Yes, that is the great thing about it, and James Dashner keeps you guessing all the way through.
So on set, give me an idea what the environment was like. And these actors, obviously great, but they're just quite young. Like, what did they have to work with? Because presumably didn't have very large scorpion-like creatures attacking them with metallic and organic sort of components?
No, the guys on set were just brilliant. They were so keen to see a lot of the reference artwork that we had for what the Griever was going to look like. Dylan O'Brien especially, he was always looking at my computer going, what's the next thing? What is it going to look like? And so what we did for them on set, because the challenge for them is they're in a 360 blue environment, just a floor, right? There's a sequence where the kids enter what we call the Griever bridge. They find where the Grievers are actually coming from. And that environment was all computer generated. In addition to that, they're being attacked by Grievers. What you actually see on set is the kids probing with spears with like 3 guys dressed in blue with shields, because you had to be fairly physical and aggressive. So that you really felt like there was one-to-one action and battle. So yeah, they were great with that. There was a lot of cleanup work to do as a result of that kind of thing. So so kudos to my team back at Method, because they did a lot of cleanup work there. And my animation team studied the footage. How can we get the best action out of the Griever that wasn't there at the time, and tie that into the action of the kids probing and spearing.
I got a question there about how you get the lighting to have the creature sitting in as well, because the way that you kind of, sometimes people sort of simplify things. We did some HDRs and we did image-based lighting, but if you stick an HDR reference in there, be it a probe or a ball, you're going to get a lot of blue screen,
right?
Which of course is going to completely colour the HDR image-based lighting. It's not what you want. Did you make artificial HDRs, or how did you sort of solve that?
Yeah, we did. We did HDRIs for practically every setup, which I know, people question why you would do that in a blue screen environment. It gives you the point light sources so you can work out, because the kids are in that environment as well. So if there is a strong key light, you should mimic that. But yeah, for the Griever bridge, we made that CG environment and made our own HDRs really to sort of reflect that.
Because the other thing is you don't have the high walls, so presumably you'd have to be pretty careful on set to make sure that when they were meant to be shadowed by a wall that isn't there, you'd sort of flag it or whatever. Otherwise, it would be really hard on the team to make it sit in.
Yes, and we were aware of that going in right at the beginning. So that's one of the things that we did talk to the DOP, Enrique, about. So there were times where, because the set on location was only 16 feet high, we would be able to say, look, where's the shadow is cutting them in half. They would be completely in shadow now. So then we'd fly in a little rig to sort of cast them in shadow, and then we would extend the shadow. So that was a good way.
It's a huge plot point whether it's day or night, because of course different things happen at night with the maze. Were you kind of conscious of time of day for sunlight, or was the idea with the maze being disorientating that maybe exactly where high sun was didn't matter so much? And
well. Some of the images that I looked at right at the very beginning were very important, and they set the look of the movie. So the doors open early in the morning or late at night, and so we had this beautiful sort of cast light against the walls, and that I tried to maintain all the way through as a look. So when you see the doors closing at the end of the day, they've got that lovely 3/4 light on them and a sort of setting light, which is beautiful.
And now you were using blue screen in the exteriors, but when you were doing the night stuff, did you shoot day for night? How did you do that? Because if you drop the light levels on a blue screen, it tends to get pretty noisy even on an Alexa.
No, a lot of the night stuff, we genuinely shot at night, and I didn't bother with any blues.
Right.
The Grievers attacking the glade at night is very fast, so we just did a little bit of roto for that. That made more sense to us.
Well, congratulations to the whole team, and it's just really interesting to hear you putting an entire sort of pipeline together. Yeah. It's a great opportunity. I hope that works out really, really well, and I hope we get to see part 2 and 3 as
I'd love to be involved with that.
Thanks so much for being with us.
Very good, thank you.
It is so nice to see a woman VFX supervisor, and Sue did such a great job on this film. Hey, we would love to hear your feedback. Just email us, post us in the comments section of FX Guide or our Facebook page, or via Twitter, #FXGuideNews. Until next time, see ya. For industry news, in-depth features, podcasts and forums, check out fxguide.com. And for visual effects training, check out fxphd.com.